What's up, guys? It's Paul, the MMA Shark, coming at you, and we are just two sleeps away from UFC 280, a card that is just succumbing to the masses. Everywhere you look, you see the promotions, you see the commercials. It's actually more publicized than political ads at this point. UFC 280 coming at us 10 a.m. Eastern Time, Saturday, from Abu Dhabi. Of course, we've got two big title fights to headline it. The main event, Islam Makhachev, challenging, vacant, but challenging the man who never officially lost his title, Charles do Bronx Oliveira. And in the co-main event, we've got another huge bantamweight title fight, TJ Dillashaw versus Aljamain Sterling, the defending champion Aljamain Sterling. And what a card. All I can say is what a card UFC is throwing at us. They just put it all together for this night, and this night's going to shine. It's going to be an absolutely incredible card. If you want to have even more fun on this card, I highly suggest going over to www.themmashark.com. Get yourself a subscription. Everyone gets 25% off their first month. It's kind of a no-brainer. I'm up 406.5 units year to date, hitting cards at over 92% since September 1st. Transparent, real results. We had a huge UFC Vegas 62. Martinez and Grasso parlay, the Tatsira Taira win, the submission call. It's just been complete fire. So if you want to hit cards at the percentage I'm hitting, do yourself a favor, head over to themmashark.com, get a subscription. I am Paul the MMA Shark, and we're going to dig into UFC 280 a little bit. And my first piece of suggestion would be, don't go crazy betting fight one on this card. Lena Lansberg taking on Karol Rosa. It's a very juicy fight. Karol Rosa is coming in at minus 320 at the moment. The comeback on Lena Lansberg at plus 255. It's actually a more competitive fight than I think. I do think that Rosa wins the fight, but nothing is justifying those odds. Rosa is not a finisher. Lena Lansberg could be. She lands some lethal elbows from clinch. Obviously, Karol Rosa training in a much better gym. Panama in Brazil. One of her main training partners is Jessica Andrade. So she's going to be the younger fighter in this fight. She's going to have a reach advantage of this fight, 67-inch to a 65-inch reach advantage. But Lena Lansberg, don't sleep on her. She's coming off two losses. They're both coming off a loss to Sarah McMahon. She looked awesome versus Macy Chiasson. She defeated her in 2019. She beat Tanya Evinger in 2019. The funny thing with Lena Lansberg, when she knocked off Macy Chiasson, she was plus 340 in that fight. And, we just saw how tough Macy is. Macy's extremely tough. She did lose to Irene Aldana, but had a huge second round. Actually became a live favorite in that fight. I'm glad she lost the fight. We had a very big play on Irene Aldana in that fight. And Macy was strong enough to make that a hairy situation, and Lena defeated her. So, Lena at plus 255 to me screams value. Unlikely going to be a play, unlikely going to be an official play. I don't like... On fight one, I never want to chase a big dog or lay a lot of juice. It's just something that I've fallen into. I don't want the night to start off in a dogfight over fight one. And to be honest with you, get the extra half hour of sleep. You're not missing anything big in fight one. If you're on the West Coast, 7 a.m. start time, set your alarm for 7:30. You're missing nothing on this fight. Likely going to be a decision fight. Karol Rosa likely wins this fight by decision. I think over 2.5 is a very safe bet in it. It is minus 170 at the moment, though. So, again, juice, first fight, not my favorite spot to be in. Of course, for all my premium plays and picks, get yourself a membership over at themmashark.com. There's no contract. There's no commitment. You can cancel any time. You do not need to log into the website. You just receive all the plays by text. I cap Bellator, LFA, PFL, nearly everything. So any MMA that has lines on it, any major books that carry it, I'm putting plays out. Tomorrow night we have an LFA card. So I've been crushing LFA. So I'm going to call that a bonus card. And I will be here on YouTube, and I'm going to give out my full selection of plays for that card tomorrow. So, digging into this card a little bit more, fight two, it's become unbettable. It's actually very disrespectful for Malcolm Gordon to be plus 800 in this fight. Malcolm Gordon coming off the win over Little Fig and finished Dennis Bodnar last fight. Sort of crushed his elbow on a takedown, but he did win the fight. The problem with Malcolm Gordon is his takedown defense. He's got 0% takedown defense. And you do not want to have 0% takedown defense when you're fighting Muhammad Mokaev. Muhammad Mokaev made a huge impression in the UFC when he dropped Cody Durden a minute into the fight and submitted him. And his last fight, he took on my former flyweight champion contender, Charles Johnson. Charles Johnson, after he fought for me, went on to LFA to become the bantamweight champ and just dominated there. Charles Johnson gave up 11 takedowns versus Muhammad Mokaev. But the interesting thing is Charles Johnson was able to keep getting up versus Muhammad Mokaev, which tells me Mokaev's top pressure isn't really all that good. Now, comparing Malcolm Gordon to Charles Johnson is no comparison. Charles Johnson is clearly the better fighter. Mokaev's getting a bone thrown here at home, but he's also minus 1,200. So, if you want to risk 24 units to win 2 units on the fight, they're free units, but not something I would ever, under any circumstance, risk doing. Injuries happen in fights. Just ask Tom Aspinall or Brian Ortega. So, fight 2, likely a clinic by Muhammad Mokaev. I'm pretty sure he's going to really do whatever he could to get the finish. Not something I'm willing to throw anything out on, but could be an exciting fight for as long as it lasts. Fight 3, a bit of an interesting fight. Armen Petrosyan, who has looked very good in the UFC. He did take a loss to Caio Borralho last fight. Caio Borralho is someone we will talk about later on this podcast. But what's interesting about Caio Borralho after his head kick knockout on Contender Series, he beat RoboCop in his UFC debut. And we just saw how tough RoboCop is. It was a split decision win over RoboCop. Both landed really good strikes in that fight. But, that's a good impression to knock off Gregory Rodriguez in your UFC debut. And then, of course, he dropped a decision to Caio Borralho. Borralho was absolutely crushing him the first 2 rounds and gassed. One thing I can say about Armen Petrosyan is his gas tank's not in question. The only question I have in this fight would be AJ Dobson and the game plan he's going to play. If Dobson wants to strike with him, he can, but it's going to be a little bit more dangerous. If Dobson could shoot one of his single leg takedowns and get Petrosyan to the ground, I think he can have a path to a victory in that fight as an underdog. Not saying I think he's going to win the fight. I'm saying that would be his path to victory. AJ Dobson didn't look bad versus Jacob Malkoun. Jacob Malkoun is proving over and over again that he's an absolutely worthy underdog, and Dobson did lose a decision to Malkoun, but, Malkoun is a fast riser. I think Dobson versus Petrosyan is going to be a really good fight. On the feet, it favors Petrosyan. On the ground, it favors Dobson if he can get it there. One thing I could say with Armen Petrosyan, who's coming in with a 6-2 record, it may not be real because he has a couple fights in question on whether they actually happened or not. There's some footage of him on YouTube taking on someone in Armenia where it looked like he threw a body kick and the guy went down on the ground and was laughing and they shook hands. And after they shook hands and were laughing, Tapology didn't recognize the fight, but Sherdog does. So Sherdog has him 8-2. UFC and Tapology have him 6-2. A little bit shady with Armen Petrosyan. He's already 31 years old and 6-1. He is fighting out of the academy right now, so he's getting solid work in. AJ Dobson is with Matt Brown. Clearly, cardio. The cardio is going to be there, but Petrosyan's appears to have been there as well. Interesting fight to say the least. Right now, Petrosyan is minus 225 with the comeback on AJ Dobson at plus 175. Tough test for Dobson. Certainly something that I believe he can win, though. Next prelim, we have Abubakar Nurmagomedov versus Omargadzhiev. I like Omargadzhiev. I think he's a tough fighter. I think he's an excellent, well-rounded fighter. They're both from Russia. They've both got excellent takedowns, excellent ground games. Omargadzhiev's the dog here at plus 175. Actually checking now, he's down to plus 130. That's absolutely a little bit more like it. Abubakar Nurmagomedov is no relation to Khabib, no, not even near the level of Khabib or his brother or Islam Makhachev. He's been submitted twice, once in the UFC, once on PFL. He did have a decision win over Jared Good in his last fight. Omargadzhiev is coming off a loss to Caio Baralho. I feel like if you lose to Caio Baralho, you get an underdog spot at UFC 280. Prior to that, he did defeat Jancy Silva on the Contender Series, and every other one of his fights that he has won has been by finish. So you got a guy in Omargadzhiev who is 13-1 with 12 finishes other than the Contender Series and the loss to Caio Baralho. Interesting fight. They may impose each other's will and turn this into a grappling match. If they do, that favors Abubakar. If it's on the feet, it absolutely, without question, favors the underdog in Godzi. So many fights on this card. I'm just moving along here because I don't want to lose attention. Everyone's waiting to hear what the main card talk is, so let's get to it. But we've got some killer prelims to get to first. Volkan Oezdemir versus Nikita Krylov. Excellent fight. You know, two fighters that probably the UFC is thinking the loser of this fight is done. The winner of this fight can still make a run. Very interesting that Volkan Oezdemir is plus 145 on this fight. Nikita Krylov out of the Ukraine, the minor. He's very tough. He's very good. He's solid. He's better on the ground if he can get it there. Volkan Oezdemir has fought nothing but the top level of competition and really has not been taken down a lot. He lost a decision to Muhammad Ankalaev. Prior to that, he got knocked out by Yuri Prohaska. That doesn't really hurt your resume. Before that, he knocked out Ilir Latifi and beat Alexander Ratchich by decision. Two really big wins, so he's far from done. His last fight versus Paul Craig really wasn't able to take him down, and the few attempts he had, Volk kind of made him look silly. And, you know, Nikita Krylov is not going to fight how Paul Craig fought. Nikita Krylov's got power. He's not afraid to punch and trade. I think that Volkan Oezdemir absolutely has the more power of the two fighters, as to where Nikita Krylov has more to his potential of finishing the fight if he were to get it to the ground. If he can get on top, maybe getting a full mount, top mount, that will be some problems for Volkan Oezdemir. His chin has been a little suspect at times. But Nikita Krylov, you know, also, I mean, he dropped Paul Craig and got into his guard like Winnie the Pooh looking for a barrel of honey. And before he knew it, a triangle choke was thrown up on him and he got submitted. Prior to that, he also lost to Muhammad Ankalaev. And he did take Glover Teixeira to a split decision back in 2020, where he was on the wrong side of the split decision. We saw what he did to Alexander Gustafsson last fight. Granted, Alexander Gustafsson is so far past his prime right now. He's 35 years old, but he's so battle wounded. I can't see him knocking out Volkan Oezdemir in the first round. But I think it's going to be a very good competitive fight. Ankalaev and Krylov definitely worthy of being on this massive pay-per-view. And this one's for free. It's on the prelim. So Oezdemir versus Krylov, definitely an interesting fight. Moving right along to the next prelim. Definitely the most exciting prelim, in my opinion. I'm going to pass right through the Muradov versus Caio Baralho fight. And we're going to skip past the Lucas Almeida versus Tukhugov fight. Not much to talk about there. But there are fights to talk about. And that would be the featured prelim. We've got Chicago's Bilal, remember the name Muhammad, taking on Renzo Gracie Philadelphia's undefeated 15-0 Sean Brady. If you saw Sean Brady at the press conference today, he kept it simple. He said the Eagles are 6-0 and Sean Brady's going to be 16-0. He's very high on himself. He believes he can get the job done on this fight. A lot of people are questioning his cardio based on his body language in the third round versus Michael Chiesa. He completely dominated Michael Chiesa the first two rounds. He dominated him so hard that he did gas himself out. But people are not looking at the fact that Michael Chiesa has top 2 or 3 cardio in the 170-pound division. The guy's a complete gas tank, you know. He's a higher weight class Clay Guida that just keeps coming at you. So, yes, he tired him out. Will Bilal Muhammad tire him out? I'm not positive. Sean Brady has looked so impressive in his fights, but Bilal Muhammad has actually looked more impressive. He's known as this boring fighter that'll lay and pray his way to a victory, but then goes out there the last two fights and outstrikes Wonder Boy and Vicente Luque and wins two main events in a row. So this is a major, major step up in competition for Sean Brady, and I am kind of shocked, and I think Bilal Muhammad should be appalled of the odds being where they are. Now, they have come down a bit. Brady is getting bet down. Muhammad was plus 150 earlier in the week after opening minus 230. Right now, he's plus 115. Sean Brady is minus 140. So you look at some of the wins Sean Brady has had since he got called to the UFC after crushing the regional rankings on Cage Fury, coming off the win versus Michael Chiesa, where he won a decision 29-28. Prior to that, he submitted Jake Matthews in the third round. He submitted Christian Aguilera in the second round. He dropped Court McGee. Court McGee is very hard to drop. His teammate Jeremiah Wells actually knocked Court McGee out cold in the first round of their last fight. But he's made a really good impression in the UFC, but it's a big step up in competition versus Bilal Muhammad. I think Bilal Muhammad is a top contender. We all saw when he was fighting Leon Edwards, he was getting the bejesus beat out of him until he got the eye poke and that fight ended. Probably a blessing in disguise that fight didn't get rebooked, because I don't think Bilal Muhammad had a prayer. He's not a top 1 or 2 guy, but he's definitely a top 5 guy. And, he's got a lot to lose here, and Brady has a lot to gain here. It's going to be an ultra competitive fight. I think we're going to see it on the feet a lot more than many think, but just my thoughts on it. I think it might go the distance. It's just kind of a thought, not an official play, but, I think both are going to respect each other's power, and should be a really exciting fight. I think that's a hell of a way to end. Let's face it, that fight can headline any UFC fight night. So, and it's on the prelims. This card's so big. So, taking a look at the main card, the card that everyone's been talking about. And if you want to get all the plays, obviously, head over to www.themmashark.com. Promo code embedded into the website gets you all my plays for 30 days. It auto-renews unless you cancel. You would cancel if you don't like making money, because that's all we do over there. First fight on the preliminary card. Katlyn Chookagain coming back, 18-4 as a professional. Another Pennsylvania fighter, a New Jersey fighter. She's coming off a massive win over Amanda Ribas by split decision, and a decision win over Jennifer Maia. All of her UFC wins have been by decision. She throws punches in bunches. She screams like a tennis player when she throws the punches. If you hear a woman screaming on your TV Saturday night, you know that the main card has started, because that is Katlyn Chookagain. Got one of her toughest opponents to date outside of her UFC title fight versus Valentina Shevchenko, and her only other loss is to UFC champ Jessica Andrade. So 2 losses in the UFC, yes. She was finished in both, but it was versus Valentina Shevchenko and Jessica Andrade. But Manon Fiorot is definitely her toughest test outside of those two. She's coming in 9-1, coming off 7 wins in the UFC. I remember she knocked out Baby Shark, Tabitha Ritchie. She defeated Maria Bueno Silva by decision. Same with Jennifer Maia by decision. I remember that vicious head kick she landed on Victoria Leonardo. And prior to that, she fought in UAE, where she just dismantled all of her competition. I think the odds are justified in this fight with Manon Fiorot minus 190. Chookagain in a very unfamiliar spot at plus 160. One thing with Chookagain, you got to realize that she's very high volume and throws punches in bunches. And if this fight goes to the scorecards, she absolutely will have a chance at getting the nod just based on her volume. Effective striking and volume is her game. Not so much damage, not so much submission threats. Takedown, slight edge over Manon, I think. So we'll see. It's obviously my least favorite fight on the main card, but it is a deserving fight. The winner of this fight likely will be in line for a title fight or a main event fight. Now we're getting to the good ones. And don't get me wrong, they're all good, but we're getting to the good ones. Fight 2 on the main card. We have Beneil Dariush. What a resurgence he has made. And not a resurgence as if he was bad, but ever since he was knocked out by Alexander Hernandez, he has been on a tear. Just think, just since 2018, he's been undefeated. He's beaten Thiago Moises, Drew Dober, Frank Camacho, Drakkar Klose, Scott Holtzman, Diego Ferreira, and Tony Ferguson in a row. That is one hell of a resume. At one point, I thought he was next up for a shot at the belt, and Islam Makhachev has emerged. But out of nowhere, here comes Mateusz Gamrot. Gamrot was a huge underdog in his fight versus Arman Tsuksaran, and he defeated him in the main event. That main event back in June, still one of my favorite main events of the year, where Gamrot just kind of came out of nowhere and dominated the last 4 rounds of the fight. Prior to that, he has a submission win over Diego Ferreira, a submission win over Jeremy Stevens, and poor Scott Sots Holtzman, he knocked him out. He has been absolutely electrifying, as has Beneil Dariush. Beneil Dariush out of King's MMA, always getting that work in. Rafael Cordero will be in his corner. Originally out of Iran, he's got a really good backstory. And Mateusz Gamrot is the younger fighter in this fight. He's 31 years old, American top team, tough as it gets. He's out of Poland. I think he's definitely one of the biggest up-and-comers in the division. It's so hard to think that Beneil Dariush is going to lose this fight coming off all the wins that he's come off of. But Beneil Dariush is going to lose this fight. My free play for UFC 280 is Mateusz Gamrot to win this fight as a minus 190 favorite over Beneil Dariush. Gamrot is the real deal. I'm telling you right now, he will be fighting for a belt by the end of 2023. There's no argument to be had there. There's no question about it. Beneil Dariush, love him, tough fighter, can get it done on the feet, on the ground, or by decision. Gamrot's got his number in this fight. Gamrot will beat Beneil Dariush. If he doesn't, shit sandwich. I will eat my words. I will admit that I'm wrong, but Gamrot is the play there. It's one of my most confident plays at the moment, to be completely honest. So if you're watching this video, I hope you make enough money on that fight to get a subscription to the MMA Shark, where we like to cash them all. We like to cash that parlay. We like to cash that dog. So feature fight of the night, Petrosyan versus the Sugar Show, Sean O'Malley. Today at the press conference, Petrosyan told Sean O'Malley he looks like a whore that would be working a corner. He wasn't wrong. O'Malley looked like a whore that would be working the corner. But at the end of the day, Sean O'Malley is 15-1. He's a huge mega prospect in the division. His only loss, he got knocked out with elbows to Marlon Vera. Not really an awful loss to have. He did look awful in his last fight versus Pedro Munoz. He absolutely lost round 1 of the fight that he was favored by minus 430 in, and he was losing round 2 when Munoz landed the head kick. I do feel like the Sugar Show was starting to put things together in that second round and likely would have won that fight by decision, but I'm not really sold on his power. You look at his right cross win to when he fought Eddie Wineland. I would knock out Eddie Wineland right now. Thomas Almeida, Thomas Almeida started 20-0, 21-0, and he's knocked out fighters that are susceptible to being knocked out. Look at his fight versus Chris Mutano. It took 381 punches for him to take him out. Guido Canetti just took out Mutano in the first round. So I'm just saying O'Malley is going to have to deal in volume. He's going to have to be fast. He's going to have to be powerful, because we know Petrosyan is coming in tough. He's going to be coming up on a mission. 2, in his mind, controversial losses. I'm going to say 1 was controversial the first time, but he did land an illegal knee in the 4th round. Let's face it, you're a world champion. You don't throw that shot. So I wasn't one calling Sterling a clown when he won the title. He fairly won the title. But I will say his fight back in April when he fought Aljamain Sterling, he looked like a total shit sandwich. The fact that that was even a split decision blows my mind. Sterling had 2 10-8 rounds in that fight. It was clear as day. He rode him like a backpack for 25 minutes, took him down at will. I think O'Malley's live in this fight, but I think Jan wins that fight. So I don't have an official play on it. I don't even have a play to send to my subscribers on it yet. I'm still formulating it, but it's not necessarily a Petr Yan knocks out O'Malley easily card like fight like I'm seeing all over the internet. No one is giving O'Malley a chance, but O'Malley has the slightest bit of chance. Nothing drastic, but it's a UFC and O'Malley's 15-1, and Jan is coming off the worst fight I've ever seen him in his career, and he's a slow starter. This is only a 3-round fight. So if Petr Yan gives up the first round like he typically does, I don't know. It could be a crazy scenario. But I'm sure we'll get it right. It's just something to look at on that fight. Co-main event, how can't you be excited for this one? The real champ, Aljamain the Funkmaster Sterling, taking on the other champ that never actually lost his belt until USADA came to his door and knocked him out in TJ Dillashaw. TJ Dillashaw, of course, was knocked out by Henry Cejudo back in 2019. He did make a return to take on Corey Sandhagen and beat him by a split decision back in July of last year. He hasn't been very active. I'm not sure that he earned this fight, but I think it's a super tough matchup for Aljamain Sterling. Dillashaw doesn't really get taken down a lot, and when he does, he's able to get up quickly. The better striker is Dillashaw in this fight. These crazy spinning head kicks that he throws, 2-punch, 3-punch, 4-punch combos. He's going to be the more active fighter. Sterling's bringing in that championship mentality, though. He's going to be prepared to go 5 rounds. Aljamain Sterling had a couple tough losses in the UFC when he first came. The split decision loss to Caraway, followed by the split decision loss to Asuncao. Then he really got going when he beat Renan Barão he defeated. Then the brutal knockout, the knee he took from Marlon Moraes. After that, he just got it together. Serra-Longo MMA got him together. He fired off wins right in a row now to Brett Johns, Cody Stamann, Jimmy Rivera, Pedro Munoz, Corey Sandhagen, who he actually submitted. Most impressive fight on his resume. Nobody submits Corey Sandhagen. Nobody finishes Corey Sandhagen, except the Funk Master, Aljamain Sterling. And then, of course, the 2 wins in a row to Petr Yan. Very close fight, razor-thin fight. My lean, my side, my prediction, subscribers only. I'm going to have a relatively large play on this. Might even have a parlay, might have a cash them all, but something big on this fight is coming. And speaking of something big coming, the main event is coming. The fight that really everyone and their mother, really my mom wants to watch this fight. Everyone and their mother cares about this fight. Charles Du Bronx Oliveira versus Islam Makhachev. And Islam, this card has been built around, which is absolutely nuts. Charles Du Bronx Oliveira has been probably the fighter of the year, the fighter of the last 2 years. He submitted Justin Gaethje his last fight. Prior to that, he submitted Dustin Poirier. Prior to that, he knocked out Michael Chandler. Prior to that, he beat Tony Ferguson by decision, choked out Kevin Lee, knocked out Jared Gordon, knocked out Nick Lance, submitted David Tamer, submitted Jim Miller. It goes on and on. Submitted Clay Guida. He hasn't lost since 2017 when he got knocked out by Paul Felder, who I wish was still fighting because he did have championship aspirations, just like to take fights on way too short of notice. But his adversary, Islam Makhachev, he's the real deal, man. He is so strong. What he just did to Bobby Green. Bobby Green comes into that fight on short notice, but he was coming into that fight hot. Big win over Nasrat Haqparast, and he took the fight on a week's notice, which was an awful idea. He got a ground and pound loss immediately. Islam has not fought not even at half the level of competition that Charles Oliveira has fought. He did have a very impressive Kimura win over Dan Hooker. Another impressive submission win over Thiago Moises. Drew Dober, he submitted. Arman Tsarukyan, he defeated. That was a big win back in 2019. He knocked out Gleison Tibau in his 3rd UFC fight. His lone UFC loss came to the hands of Adriano Martins, who was 27-7 at the time, is now 20-12. Was that a fluke, or is that something that Charles Oliveira is going to be able to repeat? Charles certainly says he's going to finish him in the first round by knockout. And part of me wants to believe that's going to happen, but part of me is being realistic and doesn't think that can happen. I'm a little torn on this fight. I'm going to have my play for my subscribers, obviously. Nothing I want to toss out now. They hit the scales in about 3 hours, 4 hours. Charles Oliveira is already on weight. I'm excited to watch the fight. I think it's going to be a stellar fight. Charles is saying he's going to knock him out in the first round. If Charles has that mentality, it kind of scares me a little bit, because if he gets too reckless with Islam, he's going to get thrown to the ground. Islam is so much stronger than Poirier and Gaethje and more technical. So even though Islam has not fought that level of competition, Islam is better than that level of competition. Maybe not in this spotlight, though. So one way to find out would be watching UFC 280 on Saturday, 10 a.m. Eastern start time for the prelims, 2 p.m. Eastern for the main card. Check it out at www.themmashark.com. Get a subscription, save 25% off. And if this card's anything like it's been since September 1st, you're going to make a lot of money on it. You don't need to bet a lot to make a lot. Plus money bets, we've been living on them. Give this YouTube channel a like. My next video will be a free full card for tomorrow's LFA card. I'm going to post all my plays on here for that LFA card, and it's actually a really good LFA card. It's our last card for a minute, so I'm going to have my full plays out there. If you have a book that takes LFA and you want to throw a little bit of action on it, just check out this channel, subscribe to it. Next video will have all my plays. But of course, the focus for the weekend is UFC 280. So let's go. For now, I'm checking out themmashark.com. Catch you guys later. Let's cash.